welcome to today's episode where we're going to be discussing how to master 90 days trials as part of our Empowering Retail series. So grab a coffee, take a break, and discover more about mastering 90-day trials. I'm joined by Yevgenya Chityan, who is our in-house business and HR advisor. Yev has a master's degree in business administration and has been an HR professional for more than 10 years. She has experience in numerous industries, including education, public sector, manufacturing, and hospitality, partnering with business leaders to provide advice and support on all aspects of employment and people processes. Kia ora, Yev. Thanks for joining me.
Kia ora, thank you so much for having me.
Well, just before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that today's episode is information we're providing of a generic nature. We're not giving you specific advice or legal advice. HR and employment issues are extremely complicated. And if you have got some questions about 90-day trials or anything else HR related as they relate to your business, please give Yev a call on 0800 472 472, where Yev will be able to provide you with specific advice about your circumstances. I guess the key thing, the simple thing is that it's really complicated. Give us a call and we'll work it out with you. We do know that one of the issues that Yev is frequently called about from members is how they can probably use the 90-day trial clause. So Yev, can you tell us what are the key benefits of using a 90-day trial period for new hires?
Yeah, absolutely. So 90-day trial period is a really great way for employers to actually test out if the new hire is a good fit because they may look wonderful on paper, have a great CV, and even have positive references, but you never really know how well they actually work until you can see them in practice. And I think it's really important for employers to distinguish between what makes someone a good fit or what things can actually be improved as they're working through that trial period. So if there are some gaps in their performance, are there things that can be retrained or explained to them? Or is it really a poor team fit? Or is there integrity issues or something like that that probably wouldn't improve?
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
that fit is so important. So really good to be clear about that. So when we think about it, are there any specific requirements that you need to follow to ensure that the trial period is legally valid for your business and your employees?
Yes, yep. There are some things that can actually make the clause invalid, and therefore you wouldn't be able to use it to dismiss someone under that trial period. So, firstly, they have to be a brand new employee to the business. They can't be a rehire or anything like that. They can't already be working there. Even if they volunteered for the business before, something like that, you could potentially not be able to use the 90-day trial. And the 90-day trial clause has to be in their employment agreement. That's very, very important. It has to be specified in the contract, and that contract has to be signed before they start working. So we're not talking about the morning of their first day. It needs to be clearly signed by both parties before the employee starts work. The employment agreement also has to specify the exact dates. So the maximum period of that trial is 90 calendar days, not any more than that. So the employment agreement should state the first day of work and then the last day of the trial period. And the employee ideally should be given enough time to actually understand what that 90-day trial period entails. So, if you're giving them a contract the day before they start working, that's not really a reasonable amount of time for them to read through and understand everything. So I always recommend at least 5 business days from issuing the contract to starting the job.
And so if they sign the contract the day before, is that still okay? If they receive the contract earlier, but they only sign it the day before they start, would that mean that the trial period would still be valid?
Yeah, if they sign it the day before they start working, then technically it's before they start working. So I think that some employers can kind of fall into a trap where they've sent the contract, the employee hasn't returned it, and then they show up for their first day of work and sign it there and then. That's that's something to be really careful of. And what I would say to an employer, the best thing to do is have them come back and start work the next day if that happens.
Yeah, it just
Um,
protects you that little bit more, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah.
So tell us, Eve, what are the difference between trial periods and probationary periods?
Mm. Yeah, so this one can be quite confusing as well. I think that one of the biggest differences between a trial and a probation is that under the trial period, the employer can just dismiss that new hire without going through a formal process. That's what makes it kind of an attractive clause for employers to use. With a probationary period, that's not the case. In order to dismiss an employee who's in their probationary period, the employer still has to go through formal process of either performance management or, formal disciplinary or what have you. And another difference is the trial period is a maximum of 90 days, no more than that. Probationary periods can be extended. So sometimes that can be advantageous as well. You can extend it potentially up to 6 months if it's quite a critical role, for example. Another difference is, as I mentioned earlier, for a 90-day trial period, the employee cannot have worked for your business in the past. For probation, they can actually even be an existing employee. So if you're just changing someone from one team to another, or if you want to give them, let's say, a leadership role and you just want to test them out first and make sure they're going to do well, in a job change, you can use a probationary period for something like that.
Excellent. That's really good advice. So, what kind of feedback, when you think about the trial period, what sort of feedback should employers be thinking about giving to new employees to help them improve during that period?
Mm. Well, I think, no one starts a new job being perfect on day one, right? So feedback is really, really important. Employers ideally should have a good induction process, including maybe some documented information about what's expected, what different tasks are, and stuff like that. And then use a lot of good positive feedback to encourage the employee when they're doing well. When it comes to constructive feedback, it should be framed in a way of making sure they know exactly what they should be doing. So actually giving them specific instructions. Hey, I noticed that you put this thing there. We need you to put it there, and here's why. And, it's good to be encouraging because, again, no one starts out perfect. So let them know that, hey, you're doing well so far. I know it's a lot to remember. Let me show you again. Let's check in a week to see how you're doing. So they're definitely going to make mistakes early on. So just be aware of that and, don't be too harsh on them.
Yeah, so be a bit patient, I guess, and understand that people learn and develop over time in a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if a retailer's looking to terminate someone during a trial, what steps do they need to take in order to be compliant with the legislation?
Mm. So with the 90-day trial clause, the notice of dismissal has to be in writing. And I recommend that they meet with the person first. It's always expected to act in good faith, right? And so, although the employee may not be doing well, you still want to treat them with respect, with empathy. And so, ask them to meet with you. Explain to them verbally that you're terminating their employment. Refer to the clause in the employment agreement. Make sure that that clause is still valid based on, what we discussed earlier, and then give them the notice in writing. Now, it has to be adhering to the notice period that's in the employment agreement. So oftentimes there may be a shorter notice period during the trial period than they would normally have under regular employment. So whatever that notice period that's specified in the employment agreement has to be honored. So you can either ask them to work out the notice period, or you can offer to pay them out the notice period if you want them to finish right away. But all of that has to be in that written notice as well. So their last day of work, the date of their final pay, all of those details. And in terms of giving a reason, that's something that's not compulsory. Under the 90-day trial clause, you don't have to give them a specific reason for why they're being terminated, and it's best not to upfront. If they ask, give them an explanation, but keep it brief because I think one thing you don't want to get into is a negotiation of, well, you don't agree with this, and I'm going to now argue my case. You can make it clear the decision's final, it's not a good fit, give kind of a brief explanation as to why it's not a good fit, and just sort of leave it at that. And do keep in mind that under the 90-day trial clause, if it's valid for, under the points that I listed earlier, if it's valid, they can't raise a personal grievance for unjustified dismissal. But if there are other issues happening, like if they experience discrimination, bullying or harassment, even things like wage theft, so that could be like improperly paying them for public holidays, there are still other reasons that they could potentially raise a personal grievance. So just be careful about those other things too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it is a really complicated area, and we do recommend that if you are looking at putting a new employment contract in place, do get in touch with Yev. She can actually review your employment contract to make sure you've got everything covered off before that new employee starts. If you are thinking that someone isn't working out, don't forget to give us a call on 0800 472 472 to get some advice around how to navigate that space. We know employment law is extremely complicated and it's hard to get 100%. So getting some advice and support through that process will help you enormously. So thank you so much today for joining us, Yev. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you and hear about the recommendations you've got around the 90-day trial clause being successful for retailers. I'd also like to thank the Retail NZ partners whose support enables us to keep you up to date with everything retail. Hope you enjoyed this episode, had a good break and a coffee, and finally, don't forget to subscribe so you can keep up to date with all the current industry knowledge. But until next time, ka kite anō, bye for now.